By far, the most magnetic thing on this earth is liking your own energy. And keep in mind, as a man, especially as you get older, as you age, as you sort of age out of your high school friends and your college friends, and you're not going out as much, right? You're sort of bogged down in a routine. You will start to notice that people will kind of fade away and kind of go off to the wayside. And the thing is, you're going to be left with yourself. You're going to be left with your thoughts. You're going to be in solitude much of the time. And if you have a hard time with that, then you're going to have a hard time dealing with just you and yourself. On the other hand, if you are someone that enjoys the alone time, the reflection, the deep sense of enjoyment of being with yourself, then you'll have an easy time transitioning through that period. But look, I was called weird incessantly. A lot of the time as I was aging and socializing, getting to know people, I would be getting called weird. Sometimes from crushes, and a lot of times when you're young, you're still kind of formulating your identity and who you are. Then that can kind of crush your confidence a bit because then you think to yourself, well, what do I got to do to fit in? Until you realize you get to that point, that inflection point, and you see yourself and you think, and then you know that if you were to go ahead and go along with everything that everyone said, you would never be an individual. You would never reach individuation. You would constantly be a constellation of what people want you to be, right? And then you end up never actually being a real person. You're just a simulacrum. You're a simulation of what every person wants from you, and you start to just kind of kowtow and kind of bend the knee at whatever everyone wants from you. And I think there's definitely an element of danger there because then you lose yourself to the point where you don't even know who you are. And that could crush somebody that's still trying to formulate an identity. So that was it. I never wanted to let normies sort of dim my light. I always wanted to live my truth, if you will, to steal a term from the progressives. And I dug down on that, right? And I stuck to my guns and I stayed with it, and I stayed the course because I knew that in the long run I was gonna have to live with myself, and enough that I had to be okay with the fallouts, the misfortune, the crushes, the heartbreaks, the breakups, the end of whatever it is that I was dealing with. And I had to come away with myself because at the end of the day, look, I tell myself all the time, stay wild, stay weird, and stay wired. This is the other thing too, is you got to be guided by spirit. And let me tell you what, I have a couple examples, right? I have this idea in my mind and it makes sense to me, and hopefully it'll make sense to you, but it's the idea that there is a checks and balances of the universe. If you're a fat guy, you're supposed to be funny, right? That makes sense. You're not supposed to be boring. If you're ugly, you gotta have wordplay. You gotta have the gift of gab. If you're a short king, then you gotta be spiritually a monster, an NBA player. You gotta be tall. You have your energy, your aura has to really be the elephant in the room. You gotta be able to be jarring. And if you're in the middle, you're stuck. You really have to make something of yourself. Because look, this is the thing. I give you my example. I'm kind of like a guy that's in middle of the road, average in many ways, right? Not mega hot, but not super ugly. Not very tall, but not very short. Not much of anything. I wasn't on the extreme end of anything. So what that meant was that I had to really magnify my personality and who I was, and I became all the things that I wanted to, right? I became very funny, very cerebral, very interesting. Just all the things that I wanted to kind of lean into, I became Mr. Aura Farmer par excellence. I wanted to, I wanted to dive into many interests, and I made sure that I adopted them. And what I would do is anybody that I found interesting, I would study them and I would see how I could kind of add a little element of them to myself, style wise, gaze, interest, intrigue, performance, just all the things that make you who you are. So if you are an average Joe, if you were like me at one point, then you got to find a way to get out of the middle, and you have to lean into it. Because like I said, there is a checks and balances in the universe. And that is kind of where you find your energy and your edges. is really standing out from the crowd, because one of the biggest problems that I see now is a lot of interest. There's a lot less interesting people in the gene pool. There's a lot of people that have decided that they're no longer going to be interesting and no longer have any interest and not build intrigue and have any lore or anything interesting to add to the conversation. And I notice this right away, because if I don't carry the conversation, things get real silent real fast. And if anything, that should be a concern if you're one of these people, because the last thing you need to do is be boring. And I think one thing that I can leave you with is that if you want to be comfortable being yourself and being with your own energy, it's that you should talk to people as if you already know them. I think that's always the best way to kind of approach these things. But nevertheless, the most magnetic thing on the earth is liking your own energy. Anyways, I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.